Welcome on in to the Utah Blockcast. I'm Steve Bartle, the Utah Insider for KSL Sports. Appreciate everyone tuning in on YouTube or listening on your podcast platforms over the last few episodes. It's been a lot of fun getting to incorporate some video with these podcasts, and this is going to be a fun little thing that we do. I don't know, for the as long as we continue to do the Blockcast, I guess we'll see. But it's been fun, and you're going to see some tweaks and some evolution, some changes, as we do each and every episode. But I think I'm getting into a bit of a groove with things on YouTube. So it's been a lot of fun. Appreciate everybody, like I said, tuning in on on the Blockcast. And on this one, after talking about the X factors for Utah football in 2025, I thought I'd reach out to the biggest X factor in 24/7 sports coverage of recruiting, and that's Blair Angulo. He does such a great job with his coverage and what he does for 24/7 sports. It's been a lot of fun to watch his growth and development in his career there at 24/7 sports. And he was out here last week at West High School for the Under Armour Next camp, and we had some fun, had some good conversations, and so I thought it would be it would be great to have him on the podcast this week. So it's a good 20-minute conversation with Blair, and we cover a number of different things, talk about a handful of different prospects individually, and just have a good conversation about Utah football. So without further ado, let's get to my conversation. One of the best in the business, Blair Angulo. Blair, what's up, man? How you doing?
Doing well, Steve. I'm trying to catch my breath a little bit, as you know, with the spring evaluation period being as crazy as it is. There's showcases, there's camps, there's events all over the West Coast. I just saw you about a week ago or so out
Yep.
in Salt Lake City, and yeah, it's a hugely busy time for us because it provides an opportunity to go see players since the season ended for the first time
Mhm.
in kind of a competitive setting, see where their progress is at, catch up on recruiting, right? The official visits are in full swing. So it's a busy time, but I always got to make time for the one and only Steve Bartle.
Oh man, kind words. I appreciate it, dude. Like, you work as hard as anybody in the business, and you do a tremendous job. You travel all over the place, and I know that you genuinely evaluate these kids. You build great relationships with these kids. You are a model in the industry. You are what people you know try to be. So you do a tremendous job, dude, and I appreciate your time because I know how busy you are. As we were talking last week, you are super busy right now. So let's uh let's get into it, man. Let's dive right into it because I know time is precious for you. But as you mentioned, we were at the Under Armour Next football camp out at West last week. You've been coming out here pretty regularly to the state of Utah over the last few years, and I would just be curious, what do you make of the talent not only at that camp that we got to get a good look at, but just the talent and the development and growth within the state and within the region.
I think there's a consensus among a lot of people that the state of Utah has overtaken Arizona as the number two state out west after California. And obviously, California is probably never going to be knocked off, right? There's just way too many people per capita. And obviously, it just kind of it's just something that you're not going to be able to take away. But I mean, coming up second in the region, I think is a pretty big deal. This 2026 class, Steve, you and I have kind of been tracking it for a few years now, ever since these guys were coming up as freshmen, and then we looked at it, and every so often, right, every few weeks or every month, there was a new guy emerging. Then there was a new player to add to the rankings. There's a new player to add to the database. And then as soon as you look up, there's 30 plus guys that are power
Right.
conference level. I think now that number is close to 40 or even surpassed 40. This is a really, really deep class in the state. I don't know if we've seen a deep class like this ever. Maybe from a star power standpoint, there's been some big names, a Spencer Fano, a Puka Nakua, a Noah Sewell in recent years. But from just a sheer amount of talent and from top to bottom, when you look down and you're going down the list and there's a player at 15 or at 25 or at 30, and you're like, man, how is this guy so far down the list? And that just kind of speaks to how deep it is. At that Under Armour Camp Series stop at West High School, we did see that talent kind of unravel, right? We were able to
Mhm.
see just how loaded this group is, especially up front and in the trenches. When a player like Bot Mulitalo, who's right now committed to BYU, can just switch over from defensive line to offensive line and be named the MVP at a camp, that kind of just goes to show you just how good and how deep this group is. We were in LA for the Under Armour Camp Series stop in Southern California just the week prior,
Mhm.
and there was really no competition. We
Mm.
thought that the offensive linemen, the defensive linemen were much better in Utah. There's just a lot of talent, and I think the state has really taken that. They've really,
Yeah.
I think, evolved from a youth development standpoint, from the 7-on-7 scene, from players going out to showcases and camps. Um, I know a lot of coaches in the college game that used to say that the only reason to go to Utah was for the linemen, right? Whether on
Right.
the offensive side, the defensive side. Now we're seeing quarterbacks. A player like Jackson Dart just got taken in the first round, following what we were able to see from an Isaac Wilson a few years, or a Zach Wilson from a few years ago.
Right.
So the skill positions are definitely coming up, and I think that's why we're seeing such a deep crop of talent.
Man, it really was impressive just seeing the amount of talent there at that camp. And there was none more impressive maybe than the number one prospect in the state in Salesi Moa out of Fremont. And obviously he comes from, a family of athletes. His two older brothers have both played at the college level, and yet it's Salesi who's really kind of put himself at the top of this ranking in this class, in the 2026 class. What do you make of Salesi's game, and where are things at with his recruitment?
We love Salesi's game. It's hard to pick what side of the ball he might have
Right.
the highest ceiling, right? Because we are able to see him at receiver, and he can go up and get the football with ease. He's such a fluid route runner. He gains separation at the catch point radius, and kind of with his wingspan, it allows him to really come down with anything near the vicinity. From the defensive standpoint, he's just super competitive. He's sticky in coverage. I think he takes it upon himself to shut down the other team's best option, and he's super smart, right? You mentioned his brothers. You
Right.
mentioned his dad Ben, who also played collegiately at Utah. I think he understands the game, and he knows the plays as they are developing, and he's able to kind of react. And when you mix the reaction speed with just his natural ability and his instincts, I think it just makes for one of the best players that we're able to see out west. From a recruiting standpoint, things are
Mhm.
a bit slower because he's only taken one official visit, but they're about to pick up here in the next few weeks. He's got
Right.
official visits set with Michigan. He's gonna get out to Utah as well. Tennessee is a school that he's really interested in. Washington has kind of been in the mix as well, and he had previously scheduled an official visit to get up to Seattle, hasn't been able to make it. So I expect them to make a decision this summer, but I've never gotten the sense that he's in a hurry or he's in a
Right.
rush or whatever, right? He's got the two older brothers who just went through the process. They both entered the portal from BYU this offseason. So I think he understands, the ins and the outs. I don't think he
Mhm.
feels any sort of pressure to make a decision or to rush into anything. And right now, I think it's pretty wide open. I think all those schools that we just touched on have a legitimate shot to add them to the recruiting class.
Yeah, he was really impressive getting an up close look at him. And obviously, we've watched him in the past at Fremont and at Weber with his older brothers, but seeing him, against some of the competition last week, you just see the athleticism, the twitchiness, and talking to him. I was surprised. Utah recruiting him as a receiver. Typically with an athlete like that, they like him on the defensive side of the ball, but I think it speaks to his two-way ability. Do you think he's the sort of guy that could potentially play both ways at the next level?
I do, and that's a huge goal, right?
Yeah.
I think players are now seeing what Travis Hunter was able to do at Colorado. We've had other two-way players in recent memory. I remember Miles Jack doing things at UCLA, playing
Right.
linebacker and running back. Maybe it's a little bit easier to switch and do defensive back and receiver, but it's been done before. So, I would never put that past Salesi Moa, especially if that's a goal of his. He did say that a lot of schools are looking at him two ways. Michigan maybe is just a one-way thing with the
Hmm.
nickelback position, but I think that's another reason why he's wide open. And I'm not sure he's in a hurry because once you're able to see how things unravel on the field and you maybe check out how you fit in certain depth charts or maybe what the rotation could look like when you arrive on campus, you can't really do that until the season begins anyway. So
Right.
I do expect them to come off the board in the summer at some point, but I think this is a player that's going to be keeping a close eye on how things look on the field this season because it's going to be super important based on his own fit and his own comfort level trying to do both offense and defense.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. And another top prospect in a state not too far away from Salt Lake City, Idaho's Fruitland four-star offensive tackle Kelvin Obot made the news yesterday with his top four announcement, taking visits to Michigan, Nebraska, Oregon, and Utah in that mix as well. And Utah has prioritized the offensive line, and it's evident with this year's team with Spencer Fano and Caleb Lomu, two prospects that were among the best, in that 2023 class. And now they're projected as, potential, if not likely, NFL draft guys in next year's draft cycle. With the news and with the competition in Obot's recruitment, what do you make of Utah's chances to secure another high profile offensive lineman?
If his goal is to play from day one, I mean, Utah has proven that they will allow a player to do that if they are talented enough and if they're going to help them, right? So
Right.
you mentioned Spencer Fano, you mentioned Caleb Lomu, those two bookend tackles on their way out, that frees up two spots. So yeah, I think if that's a motivation for him, then the Utes have a really good shot here. I was actually really bummed, Steve, because he was supposed to make it out to a 5-on-5 tournament earlier this offseason, back in like early March. Didn't end up making it. It was in Salt Lake City.
Mm,
So I never really got a chance to see him in person. But everything that we've heard, and I know my guy Brandon Huffman,
yeah.
who has kind of seen him and been able to track him in person, thinks the world of him, and he raves about not only his makeup but his talent level, his technique, just how polished he is. It's a player that might not need a lot of seasoning and probably just add a few pounds here and there, just like we saw with a Caleb Lomu and a Spencer Fano,
Right.
players that just were so refined and so gifted that all you have to really do is kind of have a right meal prep and the right weight training program, which obviously the college game is going to allow you to do. So
Hmm.
I do think that this is one of the more intriguing battles, especially for a
Yeah.
player out west, because it seems like all those options are really good ones, right? You look at the schools on the top four, and you would never knock a kid for choosing any of those,
Right.
especially at the position that he plays.
No, absolutely. And it's reminiscent of Spencer Fano's, the schools that were in the mix for him, those years ago with Oregon and Michigan and BYU in that mix as well. And so, this is going to be a pretty heated battle for Obai. He is one of the top offensive linemen, not only out west, but
Yeah.
in the class. And
It would be
and
a
you,
simple choice, right, for the official
yeah,
visitor and like to be able to have a host. Like, I don't know,
yep.
maybe we could just like Sharpie that one in right now, right?
I think you could do that. I think you could put that, grab the Sharpie and put that one in permanent ink. I think we know who he's going to be spending a lot of time with at Utah in a couple days, a couple weeks actually. Um, yeah, great stuff. And Brandon Huffman has been all over, Obot's recruitment, and he's had as great a feel for what's going on with Kelvin, and obviously coming from Fruitland, in Idaho. Utah's connection there is his head coach, Jordan Gross, who was an All American at Utah in 2002. Obviously, the great offensive tackle with the Carolina Panthers. And so there's that connection. And with Jim Harding, he's done a tremendous job over the last couple of years. So Utah's, it's going to be a heated battle with those other three programs, but I think Utah's got a decent shot there. And then, obviously with recruiting each and every cycle, the quarterback position is, a very important task in the recruiting cycle. And, with Utah, they're bringing in 4-star quarterback Oscar Rios out of Downey High School in California. What's the latest with Rios and where he's at in his process?
He has taken 2 official visits. He's been out to Kentucky. He's been out to Oklahoma State. He's got a few other trips in mind as well. I think he wraps things up with Colorado at the end of June. UCLA just entered the picture. They're the
Hmm.
local school. They just offered, so that could be an official visit at some point as well. Virginia Tech is in the mix, and then you mentioned Utah, right? That's a program that has been on him for quite some time, and with his dual threat capabilities, and just his athleticism, he would look like a really good fit for that new offense and kind of
Yeah.
what they want to do, not only in the pass game but in the run game. He will need to bulk up. He's a bit slight in frame. I think he'd be
Hmm.
the first to admit that, to be able to kind of weather some of the physicality and some of the hits that maybe we're going to be able to see from a Devin Dampier or from an Isaac Wilson in that offense. But this is another recruitment that has kind of been wide open. And I spoke to him
Yeah.
recently, and he told me that for him, it's really about just the comfort level and how hard a school is recruiting him. I think he wants to feel wanted. He wants to feel like a team needs him, and so that'll be a big thing to kind of keep an eye on with him in the weeks moving forward.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting one. And he's gonna, take his official visit here in a couple weeks. June 6th, he'll be out here for his visit at Utah. And I think he is, without a doubt, the top option at quarterback for Utah this cycle. And it's been fun to kind of, watch his tape and sort of project him in this new offense with Jason Beck at the helm. Devin Dampier is such a dynamic dual threat quarterback. You see those flashes with Rios and what he's able to do with the ball. Really impressive. And I think, as you mentioned, Blair, a few pounds at the very least will do him quite well. So he's going to be a fun one to keep tabs on for Utah fans. Let's circle back to the in-state prospects, and currently Utah isn't on the board with anybody in the state, but there's still a number of prospects left on the board uncommitted, and they're going to be in the mix with some of the guys that have committed elsewhere as well. But where do you see Utah, and how do you feel about where they're at with some of the remaining and some of the top options in the state this class?
Yeah, Salesi Moa being the top ranked player in the state, and they're
Right.
they're heavily involved there. You have Kawe Akana from Orem, who's also going to take an official visit in the month of June to Salt Lake City. I think they're in a really good spot there. I think right now it looks like a Utah versus BYU versus
Mm.
UCLA USC battle. He's originally from Los Angeles, spent a lot of his childhood there, and I think that's kind of a pull for him. But he does have a deep connection to the state of Utah, lives there now, and has a cousin, Tausili Akana, from a couple cycles ago, who plays at BYU. I know he's really enjoyed building a connection at Utah, so I wouldn't rule him out if he did try or attempted to stay close to home to end up playing for the Utes. Matai Li'i
Hmm.
Benjamin, the big offensive lineman from Lehigh, who transferred in from Skyridge earlier this offseason. Also has Utah high on his list. They're probably, I would say, a co-leader right now with Oklahoma State. That's the only official visit he has taken. He made it out to Stillwater a few weeks ago, but he told me that everything he saw there kind of blew him away.
Mm.
I've always thought Utah was the leader. I think,
Yeah.
I always kind of lean towards him staying close to home. But now that he is taking some official visits, it does seem like it's opened up his eyes a little bit, and he realizes that maybe he doesn't need to stay home to be successful. I would still think though that with Utah still having their official visit and then kind of being a co-leader right now, that could maybe push them over the top for Matali'i. Benjamin Adam Bywater is another one
Yeah.
that has Utah really high on his list. We saw him, Steve, at the Under Armour Camp Series last week, and he
Yep.
told me it's essentially a three-team race right now. BYU, where his brother Ben just played linebacker a few years ago. Utah, which was his first offer ever, and he
Mhm.
just made it out to campus to meet with Morgan Scalley a few weeks ago and kind of get a feel for everything again. And then Boise State being a bit of a dark horse, but you never really knock a player for going that route and playing for the Broncos and getting on the field early and having that stage where it seems like they're always in the limelight, right? Being able to produce NFL talent. So I think those three schools are highly contested for him right now. And then the other one I wanted to touch on was Lopeti Moala. He's a big defensive lineman from Orem. He's played his first few years at Davis up in Kaysville. Just won a state championship in basketball,
Yeah.
and he also has Utah high on his list. I think he's taking an official visit at some point next month. Just made it out to Stanford and UCLA, so he's knocked out the California schools. Really likes Arizona. Joe Salavea, the former Miami and Oregon defensive line coach, who's now an assistant defensive coordinator with the Wildcats, has been pushing for him quite a bit. I wouldn't rule out Arizona by any means. But at the end of the day, I do get a sense that this is an in-state BYU versus
Yeah.
Utah battle. He does plan to serve a 2-year mission right after high school. So I don't know if this one has a finish line or a defined date, right? We understand how those work out usually.
Yep.
So yeah, that's another one to monitor because I do think that right now it's going to be either red or blue.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I think those are all a lot of prospects that Utah fans should be keeping a close eye on. And I was really impressed with Benjamin actually last week in terms of, where he was at this time last year compared to this year. He's made tremendous strides in terms of just his ability to move, and I think he's certainly an offensive lineman that is on a positive upward trajectory. So a lot of other prospects in the state that Utah will be in the mix with as well. But Blair, let's get you out on this last one. With the way that college sports is evolving, right, and with the changing landscape, you have such a unique position and point of view, where you are a regional analyst, you're a national analyst, and you have a good sense of you know what's going on in the recruiting world. And as we've seen the changing landscape in the sport, what do you make of Utah and similar programs, Arizona State's, Arizona, those programs? What are they going to have to do to stay at the forefront of these, changes, and to stay in the mix with some of these highly touted and very talented prospects?
Steve, I'm a big baseball guy.
Hmm.
And one of my favorite books is Moneyball. Obviously, right, which detailed that early 2000s Oakland Athletics team that Brad Pitt
Yep.
so gracefully depicted on the film screen. I think that Utah has to play Moneyball. They have to
Yeah.
be able to find those hidden gems and find the guys that are going to win them games in the margins. Because right now, and you see this, I think every fan sees this. It's the blue bloods that are getting those top tier 5-star prospects, those players that have the highest NFL upside coming out of high school. What programs like Utah and in that echelon or that tier of college football, what they have to do is try to find those gems, and they've been doing that for such a long time, right? They've been able to find those players that maybe are under recruited, or maybe find those players that fit their system better than they would fit another system, or having a player that maybe fits a specific position that you need. I think they need to accentuate that, and I think they're going to be able to kind of maybe invest a little bit more in the scouting part of it, right? And
Yeah.
finding the players that they're going to be able to not only develop but hang on to. That's, I think, the biggest struggle right now is that when you do find a player and you develop him and you invest in him and you coach him up, and oh, by the way, here comes this other school who now needs a number 2 or 3 receiver, but you're going to be the
Right.
top option at Utah. I think what you need to do is now be able to kind of hang on to those, right? So I think
Right.
that's the adjustment. Um, how do you fix that? I don't know, man. Like I wish
Right.
I knew how to be able to fix that. But I think the way you do that is by doing it in volume, right?
Yeah.
You got to get 4 or 5 of those types and hope that you hang on to 2 or 3 of them in the long run, and those players will then be able to kind of stick it out. And then obviously they have to attack the portal, right?
Right.
They have to do their due diligence and find those players that need to level up from, say, the group of 5, or find those players that are bouncing back from some of those blue bloods that might have not cut it in that top tier SEC and the top tier Big Ten. I think that's just the reality of it, and
Yeah.
I think that's kind of how some of these programs will be able to thrive and survive, and maybe kind of play a money ball scheme where they're able to kind of find some of these players that fit your offense, fit your defense to a T, and only you and your style kind of brings the best out of some of these players. So if there's some guys that can walk out there, the on base percentage is pretty good. I think that's what Utah needs to do, and a lot of those other schools that are in that tier, I think it's kind of the plan of attack.
Yeah, I think that's a great connection, great tie there to the Moneyball. I think everybody that has followed sports has watched Moneyball. It's one of the great movies of all time. Just up there, top 5 movie all time. It hasn't gotten the recognition, the appreciation that it truly deserves in the movie cinema world. But Blair, man, appreciate the time. Speaking of guys that don't have the accolades that they deserve, Blair, you do a tremendous job, year in, year out. You are on the grind. You don't stop, dude. I appreciate your time and all that you do. And you've, it's been a lot of fun to kind of follow you along your path and your career. And again, just appreciate your time today, Blair.
All right, thanks, Steve. Appreciate you, and I'll see you out in Salt Lake City here in a few months.
Let's do it, man.